Welcome back to the newsroom. It's time now for a look at the newspapers this morning. And for that, I'm joined by our press reviewer, James Greedon, here in the studio. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Marcus. So Pakistan, it's still on the front pages of a lot of the dailies around the world. Just The Guardian, because I have it before me, Pakistan's tide of misery. We are now in God's hands. And if we have a look at what some of the English language Pakistani papers are saying, The Dawn is one of those papers, and the editorial is saying that basically billions in reconstruction aid is going to be needed to reconstruct the areas that have been affected by the flood. The assistance some countries have promised so far is far from adequate, says the paper, and can hardly help the West, which is trying to win the hearts and minds of the people of Pakistan. So they're, I suppose, referring to the broader efforts by, Washington and London in the, I suppose, AF-PAC war theatre, as it has become known. They point out that the paper points out that a delay in rehabilitation could enhance the sense of deprivation that people in these areas already feel. The outside world has a selfish interest, a selfish reason to step forward quickly beyond pure humanitarian urges, says.
Well, tying into that, I just heard the other day that some hardline Islamist groups are actually trying to move in. Some charity groups are moving in to help the victims of these floods, which I suppose would reinforce that impression that perhaps the Western world really needs to step up to the plate here.
Exactly, and to be seen to be providing the help that is required, I suppose. The Express Tribune, another English language paper, they're giving some facts and figures. 132,000 square kilometres affected. That's about 16% of the land mass. The journalist says comparisons to the 2005 earthquake in Pakistan are stupid. Furthermore, comparisons with Hurricane Katrina are misplaced because only 1 million people were displaced, which I suppose is nothing compared to the some 12 million which are going to be affected by this particular tragedy. Now we'll move on to the other stories in the press around the world. The Independent, a day on the blue train with Naomi and Nelson. Now this is an article written by Ivan Fallon. He was the CEO of independent newspapers in South Africa back in 1997 during this meeting, I suppose, between Naomi Campbell and Charles Taylor and others. And he says, the context is being forgotten, really. This was a big fundraising trip for Nelson Mandela's children's fund. And he describes the scene as everybody boards the train in Pretoria. There was a big train journey from Pretoria to Cape Town to, I suppose, highlight the fundraising effort.
And this, of course, is a spotlight today and yesterday as well, seeing that Charles Taylor is on trial for his actions during the civil war in Sierra Leone during the 1990s.
Exactly.
And Naomi Campbell was one of the witnesses.
Because the evening before, at a dinner in Pretoria, before this big train ride, he met Naomi Campbell. It appears he tried to woo her, to shower her in diamonds, as he did during the night, although they were dirty pebbles, as she referred to them. But this journalist has an interesting anecdote. Apparently, the train stopped off in the town of Kimberley along the way. This was an unscheduled stop, so Nelson Mandela decided, let's stop the train here. And this Kimberley is a town created, whose wealth is entirely created by diamonds, and the Kimberley Process Certification Scheme, which is the world watchdog on blood diamonds, is named after it. So apparently Mandela pushed Naomi Campbell out front, and the crowd was there. They were all cheering, and he said, I know you've not come to see an old jailbird like me. You've come to see the most beautiful woman in the world. Naomi Campbell is who you've turned out for. So apparently this is what he said, according to this journalist. And the irony is, of course, that she was being given blood diamonds the previous night by Charles Taylor's people. So an interesting anecdote being recounted.
Allegedly, I hasten to add.
Allegedly, that's the word that we should always add. So that's that story. If we move on to Le Figaro, they have a special envoy who was sent to Mongolia and he has quite an interesting story about North Korean workers in the country. Now, apparently, North Korean workers are being sent to Mongolia by Kim Jong-il's regime. They're not being paid. The money that is going to these workers is being sent directly back to Kim Jong-il, essentially.
So it's basically slave labour for North Korea's benefit.
Slave labour, and it's cheaper than, I suppose, Chinese labour from Mongolia. Mongolia needs cheap labour. It has just 2.7 million inhabitants, and so about 5,000 workers have been sent there. And the article says because they have such difficulty raising money, the regime, because of international sanctions, these are the kind of measures that are now being resorted to. Slave labour, essentially.
All right. One more article that we've got time for.
All right, we'll finish with the Times. Tea is China's beauty secret. So the journalist looks at various tea talks services, as they're being known now in London, the big vogue for various kinds of tea. So they speak to one tea merchant who brings in a lot of Asian teas. Orange flower is apparently good for your lungs. Jasmine is a natural form of Botox. Rose is good for stress. So it's not just plain old black tea with a splash of milk. Tea now is becoming much more.
As the article sort of points out, there's a lot of varieties to choose from at this stage,
Exactly.
aren't there?
The English tea drinkers have become much more refined. But they also point out in this article that originally tea, being the tea that was being drunk in England, was actually green tea. And it was only several years later that the fermentation process with black tea began and people started adding milk. But green tea is the one to go for. It's by far the best in terms of antioxidants, better than spinach. But you're better off getting your green tea, I suppose, directly from merchants, because the tea that you get in tea bags is very low grade and very low quality and not so good.
All right, we've all learned something about tea drinking. Thanks very much, James, for talking us through the papers today.
Thanks, Marcus.
You're watching France 24. That's the Press Review. In a moment, we'll bring you all the latest business news. Stay with us.